जब अमेरिका और भारत साथ मिलकर काम करते हैं, यानी मागा प्लस मीगा, तब बन जाता है मेगा पार्टनरशिप for prosperity.
Mr. President, you spoke about Prime Minister Modi as a tough negotiator. Who was a tougher negotiator today and who has a better negotiating tactic when it comes to tariffs?
Oh, he's a much tougher negotiator than me, and he's a much better negotiator than me. There's not even a contest. Okay?
Hello and welcome to our special broadcast on Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. I'm Archana Solanki. A handshake, a hug and a $500 billion hope. Prime Minister Modi's United States trip to meet President Donald Trump lays down the blueprint for both nations to boost their bilateral trade, with India vowing to cut down on the high trade deficit by hiking their energy imports from the United States. The two leaders met at the White House hours after President Trump pledged to impose reciprocal tariffs against nations who impose high tariffs on American imports. However, Trump stopped short of enacting it. Instead, he signed an order that mandates that his administration submit a report by the 1st of April. Trump also urged India to reduce tariffs and batted for a level playing field, while also welcoming recent measures by India to lower tariffs. Trump's nudge notwithstanding, the personal chemistry between the two leaders was palpable during the bilaterals. Later, at the presser, President Trump said United States would be boosting their military sales to India, including those of F-35 jets. However, the Indian government said that no formal process of acquiring F-35 jets has been initiated yet. Prime Minister Modi, meanwhile, said that both nations would work towards to sign an agreement that helps them double bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030.
Great honor to have Prime Minister Modi. Congratulations on having done a great job. Thank you. India imposes a 30 to 40 to 60 and even 70% tariff on so many of the goods, and in some cases far more than that. And as an example, a 70% tariff on U.S. cars going into India, which makes it pretty much impossible to sell those cars. India's been, to us, just about the highest tariffed nation anywhere in the world. They've been very strong on tariffs, and I don't blame them necessarily, but it's a different way of doing business. It's very hard to sell into India because they have trade barriers, very strong tariffs.
आज हमने द्विपक्षीय व्यापार को 2030 तक 2 गुना से भी अधिक बढ़ाकर $500 बिलियन तक पहुंचाने का लक्ष्य निर्धारित किया है। हमारी टीमें एक पारस्परिक लाभकारी ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट को शीघ्र संपन्न करने पर काम करेगी।
Today, the Prime Minister and I are announcing a framework to strengthen those ties even further economically, and the U.S.-India Compact for the 21st century is a historic initiative that will deepen every aspect of our partnership and our friendship. Starting this year, we'll be increasing military sales to India by many billions of dollars. We're also paving the way to ultimately provide India with the F-35 stealth fighters.
Well, a lot of important announcements there from the leaders of India and the United States. Parikshit Luthra joins us from Washington, D.C. Parikshit, trade, tariffs, defense ties, both nations have pledged to turn the page on a host of important issues.
Yes, the big headline on trade is that both countries have agreed to sign the first tranche of a mutually beneficial multi-sector bilateral trading agreement by the fall of 2025. What's the low-hanging fruit that Donald Trump was looking for in order to reduce the trade deficit of $35 to $40 billion? One is defense. The joint statement outlines how India could procure 6 additional P-8I maritime patrol aircraft from the US, how we could expand sales and co-production of defense systems such as the Javelin anti-tank missile and the Striker system as well. There is also going to be negotiations on reciprocal defense procurement, and US has also announced a review of its policy on releasing fifth-generation fighters and undersea systems. Trump said that eventually the defense talks are going to lead to F-35 sales to India, but the Foreign Secretary said not yet. A lot of formal steps have to be taken before any process is also initiated for buying or acquiring fighter jets of that kind, and none of that has already happened. Energy was a big one, with the Foreign Secretary saying that if energy imports from the US were to the tune of $15 billion last year in 2024, very soon it could even touch $25 billion.
Thank you for that, Parikshit. Well, Parikshit has also been catching up with key industry representatives, senior journalists, to get a sense of Trump's tariff playbook. Here's what they had to say.
Rick, how do you see the visit overall, the positives, the body language?
Well, it looked pretty good from what we saw with the press conference. Still waiting for all the details and what's hammered out in the joint statement. I think the big thing we're looking for is, apart from announcing a trade deal, what are the other things India put on the table to try to appease Trump to make sure India is not a more serious target in this tariff war that also got announced just before the summit. So a lot on the table that we still have to parse out the details for, but at least from the press conference, looked pretty positive.
Right. On the whole issue of civil nuclear engagement. Now, that was a priority ahead of this visit. Do you believe that this visit will pave the way for cooperation on modular reactors, small modular reactors in India? And when both leaders said that we discussed this in great detail, we are going to take this engagement forward, what are the nitty-gritties according to you?
Well, SMRs still remain mostly on paper. So to imagine that SMRs are going to change lives in India or the United States is still, a decade or further away. But as we saw, even before the visit in Honorable Finance Minister's budget speech, the government did commit to going back and trying to amend the nuclear liability law. That has been the main barrier precluding American nuclear cooperation with India ever since the deal was first conceived 20 years ago. So if the government can do that, reduce the cost for an American company to begin supplying, not just on small modular, which is a future thing, on today, as India looks to expand its nuclear, the United States can become a bigger supplier. So the ball goes back to Delhi, goes back to Parliament to see if they can bring that law up.
Right. I don't know if it had been agreed upon or Donald Trump was putting pressure. He said that US can become the -- 1 supplier of energy to India. India is going to buy a lot more energy, LNG, from the US. They're going to have defense deals with us. How do you think that went? Do you think these were low-hanging fruit for India?
Well, when President Trump talks about trying to get India to buy more from the United States, the two things that India directly controls, the government controls, defense material and hydrocarbons. So if we're trying to push India to buy more to offset the trade balance, those are the two things that are in Prime Minister Modi's bailiwick to be able to do. So it's not surprising those got pushed. With the United States be #1, that's a little bit tough. President Trump is known to sometimes kind of inflate numbers and that kind of thing. But over the long term, India is about to become the 3rd largest economy in the world in the next couple of years. So all these numbers we're talking about are only going to go up.
Right. Were you surprised when he said that we will sell more equipment, defense equipment, and eventually F-35s? That was discussed in the first Trump administration as well. But do you think India will go ahead and make such a purchase?
F-35 was a little bit surprising to see. The United States has been a little bit reluctant, mostly because some of the Russian equipment India has, we don't want to see the two things operating, commingling side by side. So that in the press conference was a little bit surprising, but there's been whispers for a while in hallways in Washington. Would we be willing to put that on the table? At the very least, it could end up like the nuclear deal. Even if the nuclear cooperation and trade never actually happened, the fact that we put things that meaningful and substantive on the table, it does unlock other areas of cooperation. We're still in a trust-building phase, and saying that we'll put the F-35, which we only do for treaty allies, is another big show.
I think he has been talking about it for some time, and he decided that today is scheduled to sign it. It's not targeted towards India or any specific countries. It's targeted to everybody. If you are charging 5% tariff on my goods, I will charge you 5%. If you're charging 50%, I will charge you 50%. So I think this was a way to basically negotiate with other countries and bring equality to the whole tariff system.
US President Donald Trump has announced reciprocal tariffs. He said India has enormous tariffs and it's a difficult place to do business as well. So how do we break down this order for our viewers. How is this order going to impact India immediately? We're joined by Eamon, who is the senior White House correspondent for CNBC. Eamon, let me understand from you, does this order on reciprocal tariffs come into effect immediately, or is it a study right now?
Well, a lot of folks on Wall Street were expecting immediate tariffs today, and what we learned earlier in the day on Thursday was that, in fact, no, this is not an immediate implementation of tariffs. What this is a study to figure out how to do these tariffs with every country around the world. They're issuing the study. That'll be completed by April 1st, and then by April 2nd, they say they'll be in position to actually implement tariffs that execute on that date. We'll see, though. My expectation is what this tees up is a massive negotiation around the world as every country comes to the West Wing to try to work out trade deals individually, one-on-one. What Donald Trump wants is to be the deal maker in chief, and this is his opportunity to go country by country and cut a new set of deals. This gives him a lot of wiggle room in terms of those negotiations, but it also means that tariffs are not coming in place today as we stand here now, which was something that Wall Street was frankly concerned about.
So how do you think his statements were regarding India, saying that India has enormous tariffs, it's right up the pecking order? Harley-Davidson was a problem. India is a difficult place to do business. Was this just a maximum pressure tactic just because Prime Minister Modi is here in Washington, D.C.?
I think that's right. I mean, I was in the Oval Office with the president when he made those comments, and I think, he was very tough on India in those comments. He said the tariffs are very high. It's one of the highest, if not the highest, certainly the highest big country in terms of tariffs in the United States. He wants to change that. And behind the scenes, some little detail is I know the White House was moving very expeditiously over the past 48 hours, I would say, to make sure that this reciprocal tariff announcement today was in place before the Modi meeting. They wanted to make sure that they announced these tariffs coming in before the president sat face-to-face with Modi. So it was clear that his meeting with Modi was not a negotiation over whether or not this tariff announcement would happen. It's happened. It's done. Now, the question is, for India and for Modi, what level of tariffs is Modi comfortable with on U.S. goods, and what kind of reciprocation does he want from the U.S. government? That negotiation can start now.
Right. But what do you think is on the U.S. wish list? What does Donald Trump today want from India?
I think he wants U.S. products to be sold in India, and he wants more access to the Indian market, and I think he wants, in exchange, access to all sorts of things in India, particularly raw materials are on his mind in a big way. So I think, for him, it's an opportunity to get American companies access to markets that they might not have access to by lowering some of those tariff barriers. And also, in return, what he wants is he doesn't want cheap Indian products flooding the U.S. and shutting down American manufacturers who are paying a much higher cost of labor.
And finally, net, immediately these announcements on reciprocal tariffs don't mean anything. It's an open threat right now, and it's a warning to everyone to come to the negotiating table.
Yeah, and you can watch what happened on Wall Street today. The stock market treading water on this announcement, really not impacted by it at all. Wall Street's looking at that and saying, for now, this is a nothing burger compared to what we were expecting. But down the line, after that April 1st deadline, we could see tariffs start to ramp up. So that's now the timeline that Wall Street's going to be focused on, not today anymore.
Right. Eamon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great to see you here.
Wonderful perspective for our viewers here in India, telling us that Wall Street is not reacting because there is nothing happening immediately. It's a warning currently.
Yeah.
Thanks once again.
Great to have you guys at the White House.
All right, it's time for us to slip into a short break. Coming up next, an exclusive conversation with Petroleum Minister Hardeep Singh Puri on India's plan to hike energy imports from the US.